Morning.
Good morning.
Good to see you all out here on this happy Father's Day. Whoever's praying for rain can stop. We'd appreciate that a lot. You could use some sunshine for a while, couldn't we? But God knows what we need and gives us what we should have in the portions He wants us to see it. Thanks to fathers. Are you surprised that's the message today? Probably not. Father's Day is important. As I look around this country, and maybe you do too, when I see the absence of fathers in many homes and many places, I see the heart of many of America's problems and this world's. When there is not a father and a mother to love children in a home because one is elsewhere or gone or lost to death, it's a struggle. It's difficult. And all kinds of rules get made and all kinds of fallacies about what a family looks like and should be get created. God always intended from the beginning that there would be a mom and a dad at home raising their children. Hope you know that. And for those who are here today because you had a father who taught you and was an example to you, you should praise God every day. That young man on the film there, obviously he was not a Christian, and the coach was. But I have a hunch because of people like that coach that are in his life, if he doesn't respect his father, he'll learn to understand fatherhood better as people who are in those positions teach it by their example, by their words, by their actions. I found a famous quote I thought was interesting. It says this, and this is from a man who wrote in the 1880s. You may know who he is. When I was a boy of 14, my father was so ignorant, I could hardly stand to have the old man around. But when I got to the 21, I was astonished at how much the old man learned in 7 years. That was Mark Twain. And by the way, saying old man back then wasn't derogatory like we see it today. It's actually considered a term of respect, if you can believe that. Well, someone said parents spend the first part of a child's life, and this is kind of, you think about this, parents spend the first part of a child's life urging him or her to talk and to walk. And you're so proud when they finally do. And the rest of their childhood is spent telling them to sit down and be quiet. How wild is that? We can't wait for those first words, and then we want them to get rid of some of their words. Use less words and listen better. You know, fathers can have some interesting conversation with their children at all ages. The teen years get really interesting, I'd say, of all. I've had some incredible conversations on the way to church this morning with Briar and Sadie. They are conversationalists, believe me, and they know how to talk to adults. If you give them a long sentence, they'll repeat a long sentence when they answer you. If I talk to Briar or Sadie about the weather or something like that, Briar will start telling me about vortexes, conundrums, thunder, different kinds of clouds. And I marvel and I grin, and when I laugh at them, they say, "Why are you making fun of me?" I'm not laughing at you kids. I'm delighting in you. I have 9 wonderful grandchildren. I wouldn't give them up for anything. They are a blessing to me. My 2 daughters have grown to be good young women, and they are teaching their children. And they will tell you they have faults like everybody else, as do I. But we know what's important and who God is. And we're trying to remember what He says and what He does, that it is number one. And that's not always easy to do, is it? This is important for fathers to get in the home. You have to lead your home. You have to lead your home toward God. You want to be respected by your children? The hours you work and the money you make won't be what does it. Believe me, it won't be it. It'll be what you say and do every day of their lives and how you lead them. And if they're godly fathers, and I pray they are, you hear God talk in the home all the time. They will remember that. And even if they get sassy at times and disrespectful in later years, they will come back to respect it as the years go on. Believe me. I'm realizing much of that now as I get older and older and older. Well, while we're thinking about these teens, think about some of these things of these years because they go so fast. A father said to his teen son, "Do you mind if I borrow my car tonight? I'm taking your mother out to eat and I'd really like to make an impression on her." Remember back in those days when you had to borrow Dad's car because you didn't have your own usually? I didn't have mine until I was a senior in high school. Actually, I was out of high school. I had my first car and paid $400 for it. It was a Rambler Rebel. I don't recommend it. But unless that's all you can do, then you do what you have to do. There's another father to his teen daughter said, "What's wrong, Connie? Usually you talk on the phone for hours, and she's always on the phone," he says. "This time you only talked for 30 minutes. How come?" Connie replied, "It was the wrong number." She talked to the wrong number for 30 minutes? They do things that we smile about and we will laugh about, things that don't really matter as far as the scheme of life, things that you might take delight in, things that might irritate us at the moment, but we get past them. We work and we move on and we watch them grow. And sometimes our hearts are saddened because time goes too fast. I can't believe I've got 3 children that'll be in grandchildren that'll be in junior high next year. And I just remember watching them be born, and I was holding those little chunky babies on my lap. Now it's hard to get them to sit on your lap because they don't do that anymore. Not as much. I'd like us to consider a few things for which we can say thanks, Dad, as we talk about children and them growing up. I hope and pray our scripture references help us out with this. I've got 3 very small ones this week, believe it or not, but they should say a lot to us. The first point I want to make this morning is simply this. When we think about fathers raising children, being an example, and all those things that are important and should matter, I want to say that we should say thanks for providing for my needs. My dad provided. He worked hard. Very hard. I always knew that about him. And if he came to the gym, one of those rare moments where he came to a game or something I had, you could pick him out in the auditorium because he was a man with a purple complexion because of his high blood pressure. I could see him right away. But he believed you're supposed to work hard, and that's it. He comes from that world. Well, Paul says this in 1 Timothy 5:8 to all of us, to them then and us now. I better put on my glasses so I can see now that I am older. If anyone does not provide for his relatives, and especially for his immediate family, hear these words. He has denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever. This would seem like an obvious thing, and everybody'd say, no problem. But a man's vices and personal life can affect his doing this if he's not careful. Some of the things that may not be spelled out in the Bible directly for what they are, that are not good for us, make a very strong point to us when we live them out in our lives. Now, let me ask you a question here. When I look at this passage that Timothy gets from Paul in this writing, why worse than an unbeliever? Why would it be said that way? Because unbelievers take care of their families many times. They do those things. It's not a surprise. Many believe in that too. Not taking care of your family's material needs, you see, to God, it's sinful. Now notice I said material needs. They may not get all their wants. It's very good at times to tell them no, isn't it? To learn to appreciate what you have, to work for it. It's certainly good to work for an allowance. Do something, do some chores, and you'll earn an allowance. A lot of people think, oh, I'm not going to do that to them. I don't believe in child labor, or I don't believe in this or that. Today's society is really screwing up our kids with some of the things they're saying. They're throwing away the old-fashioned way of everything. And I'm old enough to say that even if I were younger, I'd still believe in a lot of the things we used to do that worked for children in discipline and behavior that people are afraid of today for whatever reason. But not taking care of your family's material needs, it's sinful to God. This is one of the reasons why a man's vices are looked down upon. This is why you and I in society, if he goes to the bar on weekends, buys a carton of cigarettes per week, bets on the races or sports, or buys himself many toys for his garage and his leisure life, while his kids wear raggedy clothing or scrape in the cupboard to try to put a meal together, that's sinful. If a man is seeking everything that gives him joy and happiness first and not taking care of the essential needs for his children, he's living in sin. Can I say that? I have to. That's the way it is. Steve Shepard was a minister I know a lot about. I've read a lot of his sermons and lessons and things over the years. And he tells a story about a man named Boyce Mouton. And Boyce Mouton is a preacher in Carl Junction, Missouri, who shared a few thoughts about his grandfather, which are valuable for us to hear. He says this: "My grandfather, R.C. Myers, came from Kentucky. He married a Kansas girl and settled down in Indian Territory, which later became Oklahoma. They had 16 children. It never occurred to my grandfather that the government should take care of his family. He made the choice to have 16 children. That was his responsibility. He was a law officer before statehood, but became a sharecropper in order to feed his family. Their poverty did not discourage him from the personal pride of caring for his own family. He knew that was his obligation. He raised his children without the benefit of electricity or running water. He died without ever having a driver's license. His children nevertheless grew up to be hardworking, patriotic, and devout. I am confident that in spite of his poverty, he did a better job of providing for his own than the government, because he gave the rounded picture, the whole picture. Now, Paul instructed Timothy to tell the men to take care of their families here. It's very clear. If you don't, you're worse than an unbeliever. That's how Paul puts it. Paul is an apostle. Paul was given blessing and special providence from the God of heaven. So when Paul speaks, he's speaking for the Lord. It's not just Paul's opinion here, friends. And he instructed Timothy to tell the men to take care of their families, or they're worse than an unbeliever. That's not necessarily making the unbeliever terrible, just saying you're worse than they are. Don't think you're better than they are. Today, if you have had the benefit of a father who provided for your needs, you should thank God, and not just once a year, but thank him too. Thank your father. I tell you one thing I know, my father should have heard from me more often. I should have said thank you to him, and I failed him. I failed him. I was angry at him so many times for not being around when he was busy, working all the time, and whatever else. I should have said thank you. He would have appreciated that a lot more, I'm sure, than my constant complaining about what I couldn't do or didn't have. And I have to live with that. It would be good for him to hear it from you if that's your father and he's living. And don't wait. Don't wait and say you hope to say it. And don't say it at a funeral. Don't save it for the funeral. Say it to them while they're alive. Encourage men to be men at home, at work, at church, in faith, through society. To be the men God intended them to be. To rise up out of this world and make a difference, starting at home with their own children. You see, the parable of the talents tells us a lot about many things. The people who had many different sizes of talents, one, a few, 5, 10, whatever, they were trusted with so many because they could handle so many. If we can show ourselves to be trustworthy at home, God will bless us with other things as life goes on, to be trustworthy of and put in charge of. But if we're going to continue to fail, as many men have, and I'm not saying you have here, because you're here, bringing your family, I would hope this is a regular thing for you. But for those that's not, we need to learn the lessons Paul tells Timothy. Don't live worse than the unbelievers do. Rise above. Rise above this world. Set a standard that Christ would have for your house. When your house is Christ-like, I know your children are going to be blessed, and they're going to bless you and call you blessed. And there are many here today, I can say. I'm looking at one down front here right now whose son Levi, I will remember what he thinks of his father. It's blessings after blessings. I believe it's because he was taught right at home and he didn't get away with stuff. He made that clear that he didn't when he and I have had a couple chats. Good for you. And for all of you. Hamilton children are doing respectable, honorable jobs and careers, pursuing a good life. Larry, you've had something to do with that, and your father has too. What a blessing. And the list goes on and on. Fellas, I don't want to forget all of you. I know you all have done great things, but let me just move on for now. I even know of a man here who's been a father to his brothers because there was no father at home, and he had to take care of his brothers. And I don't know how many sisters, if there were any. name's Tom, and he doesn't want me to talk about him, I'm sure, so I'll stop there. But I remembered, Tom, when you told me. This is what we're looking for. Men who will stand up and take the lead. So the wife doesn't get caught in a vacuum of having to do everything the father won't do. Disciplining the children because he doesn't want to be bothered, or he's too busy, or he's too tired. Setting the standards that he should be setting. Thanks to fathers. Thanks for meeting our needs, seeing that we have what we want. My dad would take us to Lazarus. Doesn't exist anymore. I remember those. We'd go down to what they call the remnant basement at Lazarus in Tri-County Shopping Center in Sharonville. Remember that, Michelle? Did you get to go to those? And they'd have great seconds on clothes, and they looked like they were brand new, and we didn't care. And we'd get a couple pair every year and a couple shirts. But you could tell that was important to him, that we have good clothes to start off school year with each year, and he would make sure that happened because we were growing so fast in those days. And I thought he remembered. We were fed. We never went hungry. Times got lean, but they never did we go hungry. And maybe you can say the same. So God bless fathers who provide. Let me go on. 1 Corinthians 11:1 tells us something else. It's about thanks for the life lessons. Because certainly a father of value will give us life lessons on how to do things right. 1 Corinthians 11:1 says, follow my example as I follow the example of Christ. Now this is very interesting by Paul, because he writes something here that's got conditions on it. I don't know if you see that or not, but let's look at it. Follow my example. The word as becomes very important. It's only 2 letters. As I follow the example of Christ. In other words, don't follow me in the things I do wrong. Don't mimic my ways when they're not good. And Paul's not claiming to be perfect. He's made mistakes. But he's telling Timothy, who's like his young son, because he's mentoring him for the ministry, follow my example as I follow the example of Christ. Whenever I'm like Christ, do the same. When I'm living like he wants you to live, follow that example. Paul instructed them to do what he did that was Christ-like, not everything he did. And I tell you something, children will respect those who walk the talk. That's just always true. We live in a world where too many parents are being told, I don't know who's telling these stories, what philosophers are getting their word out there, making them think you just sit down and reason with the children about everything from the age of 1 on up. Just when they're having a fit or something like that, well, they're just expressing themselves. Give me a break. They need discipline even then. They need rules. And they will respect you because you went the mile with them, the extra mile, and showed them this is not how we behave in this house. From the early ages up. Friends, a Christian father does these things. He doesn't just let them do whatever they want and say, oh, okay, you just got to understand they're just kids. I get so tired of hearing that. When kids are throwing stuff off the shelves in a store and the mother screams at the top of her lungs and the whole store can hear you. Like they're trying to impress you with the fact, gee, I'm a disciplinarian, but they just don't listen. You're kidding me, aren't you? It means it's not happening at home. It's telling on you. That's what it really means. Life lessons. I got many. My father was a person who listened a lot more than he talked, it seemed like, and it drove me crazy. I wanted to ask him about Korea. He was in the Korean War, and he did some terrible things, was involved in some terrible things of war, that which you are when you're fighting combat. And I couldn't even say one word about any of it. He said true combat people don't want to talk about it when they come home. They want to forget about it. But he believed in respect and honor. He respected his own father. And my grandfather would come down to our house. Dad and Grandpa had a rule. If you have a kitchen, you have to have a pot-bellied stove. And you have to keep it burning whether it's summer or not. Isn't that crazy? Put on the stove, Grandpa would come down, they'd have coffee and chat for a long time, and I wouldn't be up yet on Saturday when Grandpa was already there. And my dad respected his father. And I can't say I always respected Grandpa because I thought Grandpa should have talked to me more, should have asked me about my life more. So there I was again, upset. Until I tried to understand as the years went by. It took me a lot of years to get it. But Dad respected his father no matter what. seemed to me. And he believed children should respect their parents. And he wouldn't let us talk back to our mom or do anything wrong if he was around in the house, believe me. I remember one time, I'll tell you this, talk about life lessons. I had drawn Yogi Bear and bear footprints all over my bedroom wall and ceilings, leading out to the window of my bedroom, trying to tell everybody that a bear got into my room, was trying to get me. I don't know what age I was. I hope I was young. But my mom came in and saw it first. She goes, "Oh, wait till your father gets home." And when he came home, I heard him snicker in the hallway, but they were upset when they saw me. And Dad got off his belt, and he gave me 2 swats with his belt, and I got a welt. And then Mom was mad at Dad for hitting me too hard. I like that. That's the way it's supposed to work. You play them against each other, right? Well, you take care of things that belong to others as well as things that belong to you. You don't destroy things. And I've learned that. Now I'm the grumpy guy who goes crazy with grandchildren. If they start messing stuff up, marking on the walls, breaking things, throwing stuff across the room, I go nuts. Like, what world do you live in when you think you can do that in front of me? But I guess I learned it from my dad, who must have learned it from his dad. There are certain things in life you just don't do. You learn to behave in public. You learn to protect and respect other people's things. Simple life lessons, friends. Simple things. Everybody ought to be doing. I pray you all do. Children will respect those who did. I have not always been the example. I've told you that. My grandchildren know that. But I hope they will follow the things I do that are like Christ and honoring Him, because I want that more than anything. Every time people ask me what I want for Christmas, I say, I want my family to know the Lord. That's what I want. It's not a catchphrase because I'm a preacher. It's what I want. I want all of my family, every single child and grandchild, to know the Lord and serve Him and love Him above everything else in this world. To make Him more important than anything else they're doing. As a family, we've not arrived, I will tell you. But I keep praying every day. I do pray that before my eyes dim and my life fades and leaves me in this body, I live to see that day when they all love Him and serve Him with all their heart. Because that's all I want. It's what you should want for your children. I think too many years, I believe my dad didn't care what God thought about him. Now I will always remember that he died from a heart attack while leading a meeting to raise funds for Christmas presents for underprivileged children. That's how he spent his last moments. And that he was the preacher at the Marshall Christian Church's big supporter and helper and passed out bulletins. And that he passed out bulletins and developed a prayer life as well. I couldn't be happier as his son knowing this. I needed to hear something like this. That he led a prayer in my house. The last thing he did that I was around him for, guess what? He asked us to join hands. I'm already in the ministry, right? He came to see me. He asked us to join hands. I'd never heard him do this before. And he led our family in a prayer to bless our house and bless my life in the ministry. And then he got in his car and he drove away. And those were the last words I heard. And I tell you today, I probably told you before, and if you get bored with me over the years, I'm sorry. I can't help it. I'm going to hold on to that forever. That's a life lesson. My father's son is remembering him for praying at that point in his life, for taking care of underprivileged people, for passing out bulletins. I am so happy to hear that news. Not news anymore. And that is a life lesson to me. Now the question is, gentlemen, what will your children see in you every day when they look at you? What will you be doing tomorrow and next week and next month and next year through the end of your life? The only things that are going to be eternal are the things that are eternal. That's eternal life in heaven with the Lord. This world's going to pass. It's going to be over. All the shows, all the fun, all the pageantry, all the entertainment, all the stuff that we like to do and have done, it's going to disappear. None of the material things of this world are going with us. And not everybody we know and love's going with us, because they won't turn to Him with their whole heart. Fathers, Turn to him if you haven't already. I pray you have. Give him your whole heart, all your total commitment. Make him so important that when your children look at you, they see him shine off of you. They can sense Jesus is at our house. Because Dad said so. Encourage your children to pray more than mealtime. Read the Bible with them once in a while. Ask them what they think about the stories. Listen to what they say. Simple things to do, but sometimes neglected. Life lessons are a great tool when they are the right ones, blessed by God. I believe children want to have that gift from their fathers. I think they want it. I wanted it, and I finally got it, and it took a lot of years, but I got it. And part of it was I wasn't looking in the right place. I wasn't asking. I wasn't visiting and finding out things. So I say thanks to my Father and to the Heavenly Father for life lessons. He would send me out to dig a footer. My dad would send me out to dig a footer for a porch he wanted to build. He didn't tell me how to do it. He said, "Oh, you'll figure it out." And then he came out and lovingly showed me if I was doing too much, too wrong. Come to find out, I dug it about a half a foot deeper than I had to. And I thought, oh. And then it rained and washed some of it back in. I had to dig it out over again. He just said it with a smile. Well, you have to go finish it again. I'm not ready to pour the concrete yet. Build a rabbit cage. Huh? Stretch the fence. Trim the trees in the backyard because they've got bad branches. My goodness. Sit down and watch me pack these wheel bearings. Boy, that was an exciting afternoon. He'd say, sit down and watch me pack the wheel bearings. You might learn something. I hate it when he used those words, you might learn something. Because I'm thinking as a kid, let me do it then, you watch me. He was trying to tell me stuff all along, and I wasn't always hearing. You ever feel that way about what you did, maybe? I hope I'm not alone. But life lessons, I believe it is what children want to have as gifts from their fathers. They want to be taught something. They want to see the value in learning come from Father. Finally this morning, there's one more thing I want to say. It's based on Ephesians 6:4. We'll get to that in a moment. It's thanks for teaching me about the Lord. Maybe in every family that wasn't the case. I dare say it probably wasn't. At least not always. This past week, I want to tell you about a special family who used to go to this church. And the father's name's Jim Rowe. Is it Rowe or Rowe? Rowe. Sorry. He passed away. Some of you never knew him and others did. I wish you could have met him. I didn't know him well, but I knew a little bit about him, and I liked what I learned and knew. I liked the little bit of conversation I got to have with him. Let me tell you something about his example for teaching about the Lord. Cecil Kelly is faithful and serving because Jim Rowe came into his life. Jim Rowe came into his life and brought him to church and mentored him. Is that true, Cecil? He's like your second father, wasn't he? Jim's children are well grounded and they're a blessing to others because his example as a father was a good one for them. His daughter is such a delight. I found my challenge when it comes to talking. But she just makes me so happy to hear her tell her stories and talk about her father. Jim was a teacher, a shepherd, an elder, a servant, and many other good things to people at this church. And a lot of what he did has left a deep footprint, to say the least. And I tell you something that's neat about his life, because this is the greatest fear of all mankind, is being forgotten. He will have a living legacy as long as somebody's alive who ever knew him. Because his stories will be told again and again. What do you want said about you when you're gone? If our greatest fear is being forgotten when we die, how do you want to be remembered? If not by your deeds, your words, your actions, your love for Christ especially. Wouldn't that be a great thing if you could listen down from heaven to hear him saying at your memorial service, he or she was a man or a woman of faith. They loved God and they prayed, served well, kept the faith until death. What else is going to matter? Well, Ephesians 6:4 says, "Fathers, do not exasperate your children. Instead, bring them up in the training and the instruction of the Lord." There it is. Don't irritate them and provoke them and aggravate them. Bring them up in training and instruction of the Lord. Any caring father has instructed their children about school, work, behavior, dating, driving, activities, etc., and even responsibility. Any caring father's done all those things. But what about love of the Lord and His Word? We need to remember that anybody can be a critic, too, of children when they're growing up. And it's easy, fathers, to get frustrated and talk about the things you're frustrated about and disappointed in. I found out when they train dogs, you don't get all over them for the things they did wrong. You treat them when they did right. I don't know why that works, but it seems to. And I tell you what, we got a dog named Scrappy. He needs a lot of work. And I'm going to have to learn an awful lot to help him because I don't want to treat him. I want to shoe him. I don't mean pick up my shoe and hit him, don't worry. I mean shoe him. Anybody can be a critic, my friends. Guard about telling your sons and daughters what they did wrong in performance or sporting events at the time. And instead, remember to tell them what they did right occasionally. Validate their life. Give it value. Your words, and hear this. This is Mark Irwin original. Nobody told me to say this. I like the way this came out. Your words are a treasure to them, and it will always matter that you were a proud father when you attended their events. Always. I've coached sports, I've played sports, and my grandchildren, sometimes my wife looks at me and says, "Tell her she did something right," if Lori's playing or Caden's playing. And I have to remember, yes, there were some good things that happened to you. Forget about the error or the whatever didn't go right or the strikeout. Tell them they did something right. Paul was a great church father. He called the people out when they were misbehaved or they sinned. But he built them up when they did right and were themselves examples of the faith. That's true about Paul. He called people out. Their names are in the Bible in many writings of his, the ones you got to watch out for. But he also exalted the ones who were living the faith and doing what they should be doing. I think Paul was a very balanced person, an equal opportunity blesser, if you will. So people got to be encouraged by Father Paul as they were his young disciples in the churches. They also got scolded if they weren't behaving, and we should. It's kind of like the Mary Poppins thing. Very kind, but very firm. Disciplined. Ordered. Paul was a great church father. Jesus shone through him to them, and at times from them to him, because he wrote and told the churches about the blessings they were to him. When he was in prison, they prayed for him. When they gave offerings to help other churches, he praised them for it. You know, the greatest hope children have of loving the Lord and being faithful to him is hearing about Jesus at home first and seeing him in action through their fathers and their mothers. A Sunday school teacher has your child for 45 minutes roughly. Preacher, same. But you, the family, you're with them all the time. That'd be the best place to start teaching about Jesus. Not wait until church on Sunday. Their greatest hope of loving the Lord and being faithful to him is hearing about Jesus at home and seeing him in action through their fathers and mothers. I said that a second time on purpose. I close with this thing I found. Stephen Shepard, I really, like I said, respect him. And I found something else that he had shared in one of his sermons. He shared this thought, which would close our thought for today about fathers. It's called A Letter to Dad. There are so many things I'd like to tell you face to face. I either lack the words or fail to find the time and place. But in this special letter, Dad, you'll find, at least in part, the feelings that the passing years have left within my heart. The memories of childhood days and all that you have done, and to make our home a happy place and growing up such fun. I still recall the walks we took, the games we often played, those confidential chats we had while resting in the shade. This letter comes to thank you and for needed words of praise, the counsel and the guidance, too, that shaped my grown-up days. No words of mine can tell you, Dad, the things I really feel, but you must know my love for you is lasting, warm, and real. You made my world a better place, and through the coming years, I'll keep those memories of you as a cherished souvenir. You made my world a better place, and through the coming years, I'll keep those memories of you as cherished souvenirs. Friends, today when so many do not have a father at home, honor yours if you do. Tell them in these living years things like, I love you and thank you. Paul's letter to the church encouraged such behavior, and Paul expects it. Thank your father today and often, for that matter. A day is coming, this is the hard one, a day is coming when you'll no longer get the chance while you live on this earth. So make it count. Thank God for fathers every day. Every day. Parenting is a gift from God to the child. And we need a secure place we can go to where we're safe, taken care of, loved, provided for, and taught about Jesus above all. I hope that's your home. Let's pray.